Hey, White Sox fans! Brett Ballantini here. Lucky enough to host Sox Populi Podcast number 155. Can you believe it? 155 podcasts devoted to the Chicago White Sox. Yes, I scratched my head about that as well. And it's only going to get a little weirder because the Crosstown series is upon us. The first series is just about to get underway. And we're going to take a different approach. Usually we get together with a bunch of other Southside Sox writers, trash the Cubs, have some laughs. Even in the worst seasons, there's always something to laugh about, right? Well, I've given myself a challenge this time around. We do have some crosstown mixed couples on staff, and we are going to be talking to one of them here and now as a preview to this season. And of course, it's our superhero of the site, Melissa Sage-Bollenbach, and Shaun Bollenbach, who you may notice if you are watching. He's one of them. So we're going to be polite. We're going to have a good, healthy, fun talk. We've already remarked before we went on air, there's not a whole lot to be terribly proud about and crow about. I imagine there may be a little bit of trash talk, but it really has to be muted in a season like this because, well, we're not very good. So Shaun, welcome. Thank you for being here and joining the podcast. It's fun to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Listen, it's an uncomfortable topic. We have to get to it. I have to know, Shaun, what happened to you? What went wrong in your upbringing that put you in a position where you are rooting for the Chicago Cubs? Please, an origin story of your Cubs fandom, please.
Well, I did grow up in Central Illinois. So growing up in Central Illinois, sure. For the most part, even though Melissa doesn't like it when I share this story, that in Central Illinois, when I was growing up, it was either you're a Cubs fan or a Cardinals fan.
Sure.
There wasn't too many White Sox fans, but since the Cubs were on WGN every day, I'd come home from school and turn on the game and want to watch the game. And so grew up watching Bill Buckner and Rick Russell and Dave Kingman. So really liked those guys. And so that's basically what I did. So I told Melissa, I don't necessarily hate the White Sox. Like, she lived closer to Chicago, so she's more into that love-hate thing with the Cubs White Sox, where I've kind of grown to maybe not like them with all the comments sometimes from Melissa and her friends, but for the most part, I don't mind them.
Yeah, we're gonna get into some of the quirks and maybe the tolerances and the dislikes about the other team here in a second. I mean we're all of generally speaking, I'll flatter myself of a general certain age where we're watching late 70s, getting early 80s. And the Cubs are sort of omnipresent. You got to hunt for the White Sox. I grew up, the first games I saw watching the White Sox, you'd have to find them on WSNS channel 44, which I believe just a few years later just became a Spanish station, and I think is maybe still, if it even exists, a Spanish language station. And meanwhile, White Sox are making the clever move, the crafty move to decide to charge people to watch games on television while WGN and the Superstation blows up. And your story, Shaun, isn't necessarily just unique to the deep south side of Chicago where you grew up, but across the country we have fans. I mean, that's why, and it annoys the heck out of fans like myself, and I'm sure Melissa, because the Cubs are just like part of the fabric, because it wasn't just necessarily Chicago area kids and fans that had that constant access to the games after school as well, because they're all day games then, but really nationwide too. And it did really create this Cubs culture, which makes me break out in hives, but benefits and we see the effects of it now, because the Cubs are a phenomenon, a tourist destination. We can criticize that as Southside fans, but you also have to acknowledge there's a one and there's a two. There's reasons for it, but one of them is the Cubs were crafty enough or straightforward enough to say, hey, watch the games, grow up as Cubs fans. And look, now I'm sitting talking to you, Shaun, and you are a Cubs fan wearing a Cubs jersey, in part because you came home from school, watched Billy Buck, watched the Russell brothers and all of that. Melissa, we talked way back when, almost, a full year ago. And I want to say everybody gave Elizabeth and Marge and Allie, and you may have given your origin stories, but especially given that despite growing up on the very, very, very far south side of Chicago, Shaun's right in that, your brethren were probably few and far between. So refresh me on your origin story of somehow finding your way to the White Sox.
So I grew up in Joliet, and I mean, Joliet's like a very blue collar type town. And so my dad, my grandpa, my stepdad, they were all Sox fans. And so I just, was listening on the radio from a young age. And then once they, were a little easier to find with cable on television, started watching them on TV with my stepdad. And, but I had friends at school who had like weekend season tickets for the White Sox and stuff. So they'd take me with them. So it was just, plenty of White Sox fans. And I feel like more probably so because of Joliet and being kind of blue collar type of area. But it was, I feel like I knew more White Sox fans for sure than I did Cub fans. And so when I moved to Central Illinois at college and was like, where are all the Sox fans? I'm like, Cardinals, who cares about the Cardinals? Like, they're not even in the state. Like, I just didn't get it. I was just like, and then, so that was a really tough transition for me to be like, I'm in the middle of Illinois and I either have Cub fans or Cardinals fan. Like, I couldn't find anybody to associate with.
So you were a White Sox fan, despite your grandmother being a huge Cubs fan and listening to the game every day on the radio.
That's true. My grandma also lived in Central Illinois. Mm-hmm. So she was a huge Cubs fan. And yes, like listened every day on the radio and would watch them on TV and things like that. So her and I we had fun going back and forth and took her to games and stuff when she was older. So that was really fun.
Yeah. With any size family, coming from anywhere near the Chicago area, or let's face it, the state of Illinois, you are going to have mixed families. There's no way around that. In my family, we knew to shun them. We knew to have them sit at the kids' table. Of course, they knew their play. No, of course, you're gonna have to forget. And maybe in some families, it's like there's just one weirdo who just goes against the grain. And then some families are like, there is no tolerance for whatever the other side is. We got a little bit of an inkling from Shaun. I'm going to come back to him on this, but I'm going to go right back to Melissa and say, I need to ask your general, whether it's changed maybe over the years, but your broad assessment of the other team, your thoughts when you think about the Cubs. What is your feeling?
Shaun or me?
No,
I'm just kidding. So it has changed for sure. Mm-hmm. Like pre-World Series, for me, it was definitely more contentious. It was just like the Cubs Sox games, they were the World Series for us, right? Because neither one of us had won in decades and decades. And so it was like bragging rights, even though the Cubs were more popular, quote unquote. I feel like that was our showdown. And so like, I was relentless. Like we would go to games or we would watch games and I would cuss and like the whole thing. Yeah. But then now that they've each won a World Series, for me, it's still competitive and like, it's still fun, but it's not quite as intense because it's like, okay, well now in the last, 20 years, at least we've both shown that we could win one. We may not win another one for 80 years, but we each kind of have that ring now. I mean, it was a lot of fun though, from 2005 to 2016 when the Cubs didn't, and you could still harass your Cubs friends and be like, but now it's kind of like, well,
yeah, the tables maybe have even turned too much. Yeah, Melissa, it's funny you say that because 2005, and we may have discussed this before. I've certainly said it on podcasts before. 2005, going into that, I wanted to win a playoff series, both because it's like I want to see it happen before I'm dead, but also what team had done that? It was like we sort of got, even if they didn't go anywhere, we would have gotten there first just by winning that one series. That's how strange the band division was then. And so, yeah, I guess I'm going to bump it right back to you and say, all right, there was that time we got there first. And to me, that I mirror your experience in that it's like it did ease up. It's sort of, it mattered, but it was a little bit more. It was a little more artificial because it's like, hey, okay, we won. We got there. We do sort of, I say we, whatever, but it felt like there was an accomplishment. There was a finish line tape broken, and and back then we could still joke about the Cubs. It'll never happen. Now it's like 800 years or whatever it is. I mean, it almost, the White Sox winning almost made that joke and that drought, sort of even more marked as it passed 100 years and all of that. So those years between 2005 then and the Cubs actually starting to become really competitive and then eventually winning, that was sort of a sweet spot, right? But then you probably also eased up a bit in maybe say the cusses per inning, or
I did, and actually Shaun and I went to the NLDS, one of the games when the Cubs in 2016, and I did not wear any Cubs things, but my attitude was kind of like, it was so awesome in 2005 to win that World Series. Like, I wanted that for him. And I my grandma had passed about 6 years prior. And like, I feel like every fan who's been a true diehard fan in their lifetime should have that experience. So I kind of like matured a little bit, Brett.
and it helps. I mean, I have to say, I mean, at least in my experience, it helped that we did sort of get there. It's a little bit easier to calm down about it when it's like, okay, we got it. And now you're like, oh geez, will it ever happen? Will it be 200 years? Will it ever happen for them? And yeah, you might take, especially if you're married to a Cubs fan, for crying out loud, or your grandmother, it's like, oh geez, I don't want them to suffer. I mean, yeah, you do sort of want them to at least get closer, get to the World Series, for crying out loud. Okay, Shaun, you sort of gave us a sneak preview even earlier in the podcast, but your thoughts on the White Sox, your feelings, and maybe how that's changed over time.
Maybe change just following more. What I mean by that is knowing more about them and what they're doing, just from Melissa, always following the game and going to the games. And when we would go to the tailgates with your Sox friends and different things and talk baseball, then obviously I'm going to become more knowledgeable about the White Sox and what's going on with them and talk about the team. It's fun to do. But, when you guys were just talking just now, I just realized we did have two of the most losing teams in a long time out of all of Major League Baseball in the same city. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, other than Boston, right? I mean, for like the long-term teams, I mean, all the expansion teams and stuff, but you don't feel sorry for them yet. But yeah, we're long-suffering franchises, and you just, I guess I gotta have a little empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, here's how twisted it is, Shaun. And listen, I'll be a man. I'll admit this. I think I've told Melissa the story, but I mean, one of your standards. And listen, certain people, even before any World Series, winning, there are certain people just like, hey, whatever. I like this one team, or people even claim they like both. I definitely don't know, what's wrong with them. But I mean, I think I've admitted to Melissa, one of my favorite sports days was growing up. The first Bears game I ever saw was at Soldier Field, Walter Payton breaking the all-time rushing record. And then later that day, we came home from the game. We went over to my uncle's. We watched the Cubs. It was Game 5, and the Cubs, obviously blew, as they blew Game 5, and that was like a good thing for me, because then you're in this, this contentious relationship with this other team. And I understand it's overblown. It's silly. It's almost embarrassing to talk about now, and of course I was a kid, so all right, I'm dumber or whatever. But I mean, then I was like, oh wow, this is like the perfect sports day. The team I don't like.
Are you talking about is that the 84 playoffs?
Yes,
the 84 I was the same way in 84, Brett. I was like, we lost in 83. They better not go down in 84.
I was sick for days. Just like I was sick for days after 2003 also.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, yikes. Even scarier. Yeah, for sure. And I think I also told Melissa, a part of it was, part of this thing, I know Cubs fans, they have this chip that say like, oh, Sox fans are so envious or, blah, blah, blah. And, listen, who knows? Maybe that's true. I'm not going to lay on the couch here and be diagnosed. But, part of it is shoved down your throat. We were in school. I was just starting high school, and they're playing the game on the PA, like at the end of the school day. I'm like, I don't want to hear this nonsense. I understand some people are interested. It wasn't the scores update. It wasn't an update. Hey, the Cubs are winning, because those first couple of games, they were killing. It wasn't just a score update. It was like the broadcast of the game. It's like, I don't want to hear this. So you put a chip, and I'm not sure that a Cubs fan can speak to that with the White Sox, but certainly on the other end, it's like, oh man, you just do sort of start to harbor some resentment, because it is sort of like everywhere.
Sure had the game on the TV in their classroom. One of my so I can relate to what you're talking about.
But my math teacher, so in '83, my math teacher had the magic number on her chalkboard. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if there were Cubs fans in my class, I'm sure there probably were a few. They had to experience that too, because every game they won, or she would change the magic number. So
that's a good teacher. I'm surprised you're not more of a math person, given that obviously clearly your favorite teacher ever was your math teacher. Tolerance, I guess, is what it comes down to being, especially now that both teams, I guess, have sort of broken through, and really the Cubs did it. And I mean, I don't know, Shaun, let me ask you, White Sox haven't had this experience where it's like a sustained run. Even in 2006, the team wins 90 games, but doesn't even make the playoffs because of a strangely competitive division. The Cubs had a window, I want to say, 4 straight playoff seasons, clearly under Theo Epstein, had turned everything around, got the win fairly early and was still a playoff team, even going to, I want to say, NLCS's at least one other season, never getting back to the World Series.
Yep.
Was that, I mean, were you greedy? Did you want more? Were you just happy you got the one and anything else was going to be bonus? Or was it a little irritating that they were sort of there, but never really broke through? Because, you were promised a dynasty, and you got one by Chicago baseball terms, but not really in real terms. Is that more irritating? Because me and Melissa can't speak to that as White Sox fans. So
you can't relate.
Well, you guys kind of thought you had one, but
right.
Yeah, but I mean, it was kind of the same way with us, just a delayed reaction, because in 2015, when they first made the playoffs and beat the Cardinals, and they said, oh, they're a year early, and you saw all these young players, and we were trading some because we just had too many good players and all this potential, and they were hitting 30, 40 home runs when they came up. Then they win the World Series, and you're like, all right, they're going to take off, because some of them haven't even reached their height. And then the next couple of years, it's like they all didn't really perform. And yes, we made it to the NLCS, but it felt like they were just leaking oil. And we were lucky to get there and to get to that point. And then the guys didn't, perform up to what we thought their potential was. But you thought, hey, if 50% of them end up being star players, we're going to be a good team. But we maybe had one or two guys, if that ended up being that way. And it was just like, really? How could they play so? And now you look at them across, when they went to their other teams, and they're not necessarily doing that well. Yeah. And you're thinking, what happened? Where I thought the White Sox were kind of like that a couple of years ago with their young guns, but now those young guns just keep getting hurt all the time.
That they're not even making the playoffs. You don't even get a seat at the table, for crying out loud. Yeah, I think as a Sox fan at that point, especially given the Sox were sort of at a low point or quickly getting to a low point, I think I was just crossing my fingers hoping, they snapped at the one time. And boy, Cleveland being such a weird team too, with all its weird voodoo, probably just, for lack of a better way of saying it, they just sort of gave them that World Series anyway. So I'm hoping that the inherent Cubdom will come through each year and somehow they'll find a way to lose. But that was really, even I have to admit, that was a very loose thread. I was just sort of hoping, I mean, sorry, no offense, Shaun, but I was just hoping that it wasn't going to be like 4 World Series or something, because then I don't know that we could have this podcast, because the balance of power would be so out of whack that I'm not, unless I'm just, not even looking at you and just, afraid to even address you as a Cubs fan. I mean, at least now we can sort of pretend we're still equals, because ultimately we both got the one ring, which is more than we ever thought we'd get. But, we are sort of, when it comes down to it, still sort of equal. So good. We can have this podcast. Thank goodness. It's good to meet. All right. Before we take a break, I have one more. It's a pair of questions, and again, it's a bit of a crosstown thing here. I'll stick with Shaun. I'm going to ask you first. What is the thing you find most tolerable about the White Sox?
Most tolerable about the White Sox,
or even maybe appealing. That might be too strong a word.
I would say, I don't know this. I don't want to make this kind of sound like a negative.
A backhanded compliment. He's going to give a
They're allowed. They are allowed. I would be answering this way.
I mean,
they're allowed.
Nice. You go to the games, it's not that crowded. You know, around, but I didn't want to. That sounds kind of bad, doesn't it?
That's a good answer, though. You get your shot in, but
it's true. Easier to drive in and do parking compared to get into Wrigley Field.
Right.
I mean, regardless, even if they were crowded. So
sure, dodging somebody paying $95 to park on somebody's front. Oh yeah, I don't blame you at all. Yes, there's actual parking at Sox Park. Okay, Melissa, to you, what's the easiest thing to tolerate, or even that's somehow appealing about those fans?
Oh gosh.
Or about the team, I guess. Whatever.
Our singing voices?
No, like I mean, I guess I like their uniforms. Like I
Which ones
really
though? The new ones? The Crosstown uniforms?
I do think that their City Connects are pretty sharp. Connects. Yes, I do think they're and just their history. I think they've had they've stayed pretty, the same with the pinstripes and things. I just like the pinstripes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best thing I can think of.
Yeah, and that's also its own backhanded compliment because the history is, there's been stretches, but it's been sort of parched. So yes, I appreciate the history too because they finished in last place and lost 100 games a lot of times too. So, all right, so okay, you both punted that pretty well. Okay, so then naturally then the flip then, and I'll stick with you, Melissa, to bring it right back to your husband. What do you hate most about the Cubs, or I don't know, Cubs fans or them?
Well, how they all, and this just goes on to what he said, how they always rail on us about attendance. It's so annoying. It's like, no matter what the argument, like on Twitter or whatever, people get into and be like, you guys don't want anybody to come to your games. It's like, well, do you realize that the people that come to Cubs games, half of them are tourists? So if you took the tourists out, you also wouldn't have your games.
Yeah, and I've strained my eyes for years to try to see the column in the standings that indicates attendance, and somehow it never comes up any year. It doesn't factor into the games behind. So that is a good one. All right, okay. The opening now is here for you, Shaun. What is it that you hate most about the team or the fans on the South Side?
You guys were saying at the beginning, kind of before both teams won the World Series, it was every time, especially the people from Chicago, and meet the Chicago type White Sox fans, they were just so rude and nasty right away. And
about the Cubs.
About the Cubs, and they'd find out that I was a Cubs fan. I was just kind of taken aback by that, because even the Cardinals, it wasn't that bad. It didn't seem like, but it was just like, whoa.
I think that's from you being from Central Illinois. Like, had you grown up in Chicago, you'd have been used to it. Like, it was just always that contentious. But when this was like the first version of White Sox Twitter, when the White Sox website had a chat feature. And I don't even know if you were ever on it, Brett, but like, this would have been like
this was when they had the dial-up internet.
So this would have been like
Melissa's
late
waiting
90s.
Just to get her comments.
Yeah, like 98, 99, like right in there. And so the White Sox website, and this was before MLB had like even streamlined the websites. And so there was this chat feature. And so we all got to know each other and were nice to each other, unlike White Sox Twitter now. And we would meet up, for games and tailgates and stuff like that. And that's how he got called the Cubby Hubby for the first time. And they used to harass him pretty well. But then you became became friends with them, and they were really nice people. So
I can't believe I've blown the opportunity to use Cubby Hubby yet. This is ridiculous. We're at the midpoint of the podcast, and I've completely blown my opportunity. Now I can't use it because Melissa threw the flag. Okay, we're going to take a break, take a minute away on the Fans First Sports Network. They are going to try to sell you something now. I instruct all of you dear listeners, not viewers, because there's going to be no commercial for you. All you listeners, please concentrate on hard on what they want to sell you, because I'm sure it's a quality product that you should consider very strongly. So take that minute, and we'll be back with more Crosstown stuff with Melissa Sage-Bollenbach and Shaun Bollenbach. Just a minute. Hey, White Sox fans. It's me, Brett Ballantini, hosting another podcast. What's wrong with me? I don't know. It's a question for my analyst or my family, whoever did this to me. Therapist. My father. I blame my father, like we often do. I blame my father for foisting this on me. We are talking in anticipation of the 2-game Crosstown series. There'll be another 2 games a month from now as well, but we have to anticipate this one. We do have a few mixed Crosstown couples on staff at Southside Sox. The first that has generously and courageously stepped up to the plate for a podcast to anticipate a Crosstown series is Melissa Sage-Bollenbach, who you know very well, covering all sorts, I think every variety of story possible on Southside Sox, and does it with great expertise. And her husband, the man in the Cubs uniform, representing the North Side, representing the 800 billion Cubs fans across the world and the known universe. It is Shaun Bollenbach, who is being very generous to sit down with us, though he knows he's outnumbered. We're having fun chatting. Again, if the power balance was a little bit more awkward right now, whether it's Sox on top or Cubs on top, oh gosh, who knows? There'd be at least maybe more sweating or cussing going on, but we can all just sort of laugh because the teams are horrible. So let's begin the second half of this podcast by addressing this season. The Cubs are a better team than the White Sox. Record-wise, I don't think there's any argument they are a better team. They find themselves roughly as far out of first place as the White Sox, because even the NL Central is actually a quality enough division to make the AL Central look like AAA or AA. So essentially, both teams are hopeless. I think the Cubs have cause to think that there may be a run in them because they've had a better season than the White Sox. But I'm curious, even though Melissa has had to repeat this ad nauseum on every podcast from, February onward, about how disappointing the White Sox have been, just assessments from both of you just about how the seasons have gone for your teams, or what you're seeing in terms of pain, or maybe in Shaun's case, Melissa, some pleasant surprise perhaps from your husband regarding the team. I know there were some high hopes for the Cubs coming in, and seems like they're playing about what might have been expected, as opposed to the White Sox completely bottoming out. But both of your assessments on just how this 2023 season has gone now that we're getting close to 2/3 through.
Go ahead.
I'm a little disappointed. I think they should be better, personally. Mm-hmm. Watching the beginning of the year, you had new people, like you said, you didn't know how well they were going to do. But it seemed like they had some pretty good players, but they're just not playing up to their expectations. And maybe part of that is maybe some of those players just aren't that good, is what I'm realizing now, or coming to the conclusion with. But,
we understand that. Yeah. Maybe they were overhyped, or
I don't even know if they were overhyped. Maybe it was just me personally thinking that they were doing better just watching them play at the beginning. It's like, oh, they're actually playing as a team. Where last year we didn't have a hope because we had no starting pitching, so the game was lost every time before the game started. Whereas now I thought, oh, we have a lot of pitchers, but then our great signing Italian has really done nothing, and he's been an automatic loss every time, and so you just can't win that way. And then some of our other guys have gone in slumps more than I thought. So, and then all I hear on the news now lately is which players the other teams are going to pick up from the Cubs. So apparently everybody thinks that the Cubs are sellers, not buyers now. So
as White Sox fans, we say, geez, why can't we play the market? Why can't we go out and get talent? And, it's not always a guarantee that you're going to improve. Clearly players acquired, the Cubs being active wasn't a bad thing. Certainly, getting Stroman on the team. And there are guys who have worked out for the Cubs. It's nice to just see. I mean, you get to shop in the catalog, and we don't, Shaun. So I mean, we're envious whether it works out well or not. I mean, when you can't even walk into the store, it's sort of a drag because you got no chance to get any better. Because certainly, Melissa, you can speak to this. The in-house candidates have not really come through very well for the White Sox. It seems, Melissa, you've come to terms for a while now with the inherent disappointment of this season. So at this point, you're somewhat numb as you're typing up stories or watching games because they're not really luring you back at any juncture right now, right?
Yeah, like the hope is gone. And so now at this point, I'm just trying, when we get a good game, I'm trying to enjoy it. But it's really hard when it doesn't mean anything. You're like, or you see it all clicking and you're like, why can it just click for 2 games against Atlanta and then you go to play the Mets and you can't do what you just did against the best team in baseball? Like it's maddening. It makes me crazy. But I'm hopeless. Like I know it's going nowhere. So it's this weird.
To show you an example of this is this afternoon. I'm working. I walk out and she's watching the game. And I said, "Oh, are the White Sox losing?" She goes, "No, they're winning." And I look and they're winning 5-0. And I'm like, you just had this look like, I'm like, what are you talking about? They're winning.
Yeah, woo, they're winning. So that they'll hopefully end up with 65 wins at the end of the season. It's like, and like I had a friend who was like, "Oh yeah, maybe we can go to the game in like the end of August or whatever." And I'm like, put a pin in it because I may not be interested in going anywhere near the team by the end of August. I might just be like, okay, I need to think about next year because I can't anymore.
Yeah, you got to find another sport. Yeah, it's been frustrating, and what's frustrating too. And Shaun, this speaks to you because the Centrals are the bad division. Clearly, the AL Central is even worse. So it's even more maddening that a team that could really end up at 500 or right near it is going to win this division. So it just makes it more tantalizing that the White Sox are not competent enough to even play with 500 to get close to at least be in the mix, say into the last 2 weeks of the season. And the Cubs, obviously the bar's raised to a degree because the Brewers or Reds are maybe like 10 over or something. But I mean it's nothing world beating, so it's got to be a little bit tantalizing too because it's like, well, wait, we're 5 games better and we're in it. At least the Cubs maybe have a realistic expectation to put a little bit together to get in that mix. I can see if you would admit that you were not hopeless, it would make some sense. But yeah, I mean, the hope does have to be fading because the team has sort of, there's a little malaise with those guys too. Nothing like on the South Side. So, I mean, you got to feel a little bit better than that because it could always be worse. You just got to, look over at your wife to realize how much worse it could be. But yeah, I can understand why you're still a little gutted. Like, hold on, we were promised a little bit better quicker. They went out and spent, and stuff like that. So it's got to be a little frustrating.
But I'm kind of surprised that they're already talking about selling the pieces because I thought they were kind of like building. So it's like, okay, well, this year isn't working out. So that's okay. So instead, just like more of like a retooling and like, don't like go ahead and re-sign Stroman and, maybe try to hang on to Bellinger and then fill in some other holes in the offseason so you get better. But if they like sell off those pieces, then they're going to have to replace those pieces plus get more pieces. So to me, it's kind of, I'm confused for the Cubs.
Well, they did lock in Swanson, Happ, and who am I forgetting? Another guy. Oh, Horner. So they kind of locked in those guys. And Bellinger would only take a 1-year deal because he knows he's better and he's going to play well. And he's going to get a lot of money.
But Stroman, he did want to stay in Chicago.
Just like the Cubs management has said, he has another year on his contract. He has the option to be a free agent or to stay with the Cubs. So if he wants to play for the Cubs, he can play.
It's a good way to punt. Way to go, Cubs. Okay, listen, I do not mean to be acting like an exchange student, but listen, the truth is I do not run into Cubs fans in the wild very often. So I'm going to have to hit you up with this question, Shaun. I'm curious because this is like a consummate White Sox move. So I'm curious about what you felt at the time of the hire and how you feel right now about the fact that David Ross is the manager of the Cubs. It seems very, very Soxy. So I'm wondering what your thoughts were then and if it's changed to now, if you're still impressed with him or maybe never were with him as manager.
Well, he was a popular player. So when he was hired, it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll see, because everybody's like, oh, he'd be a good manager. But how those sometimes don't work out.
Yeah.
But this year, some of his moves have been kind of interesting with the pitchers and when he takes them out, and then the order, at least lately, of our hottest hitters. It's like, why is he leaving him in the 5th and 6th spot when Bellinger was red hot? And then now he's finally moved him up a little bit, but that's after 17 games when he was on tear. And I think somebody did a calculation, said if Bellinger would have been moved up, he would have had this many more RBIs and the Cubs would have had this many more runs. But, some of that second guessing. But I don't know. The clubhouse keeps saying how they all support each other and it's a great atmosphere and it's all going great. And then part of me thinking, well, maybe that's not a good thing because we're not winning a lot of games. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, really. Yeah, maybe there should be a couple of fist fights. Yeah, for sure. I always wonder about those guys who, and again, I do not watch the Cubs closely enough to know whether he's like, good X's and O's or whatever. But those guys who get really hot all the time and they're just constantly barking and and I don't know if he is. I do know he gets hot sometimes. I don't know if he's like a guy who gets, if he leads in ejections in the majors or not. But I always look sideways at those guys who seem to get like really hot, but then maybe don't actually manage well, because that seems like maybe that's a little bit just for show. So I can imagine that maybe just the fact that he's had a few years, even though it's, I guess, been sort of a rebuilding time that he's been the manager, that maybe there isn't the progress you necessarily want to see, whether it's in the 1-loss record or even in his day-to-day managing, because you do want to see some breakthrough, like, oh, we got a guy who's going to outmanage the other guy. That's all you ever want in a manager. And both teams have had that before, and both teams haven't had it before. So it can be frustrating when it's like, all right, well, why is this guy here for 3, 4, 5, 6 years? Another one of those nepotism hires. All right, I am going to start winding this down. This is a feature that I did not preview or forecast to my guests. We are going to shift into game show mode. We are going to play a little bit of Crosstown Newlywed Game. We don't really have the cards to hold up, so this is going to just be, I guess, on your honor. But I have 3 questions. I want to see if you can answer correctly. Right? Everybody knows how that game goes, right? Answer what your spouse will answer. So, Shaun, I'm going to start with you about Melissa. I need to know what her go-to concession food is at the ball game.
I'll have to go with the veggie dog.
That is correct.
All right. Very good. Okay. Same question, Melissa. Can you keep pace with your husband?
A brat.
Probably, yeah.
All right. Probably counts. So, all right. 1 point.
You always be like, I got to get a brat.
No, it is. I say probably because that is the most consistent, because when we visit new stadiums, Melissa always finds out, well, what's a unique food there? And if it has something to do with meat, then she's always having me be the taste sample.
Yes, we do try to sample whatever they're supposed to be known for. So yes, but if we go,
but in general,
yes, if you go to a Cubs game or go to a Sox game, you would get a brat. Yes.
The judges are allowing it. We're going to pause the game for a second because I do need, you mentioning other stadiums, I need to get a report. This has nothing to do with Crosstown. It has nothing to do with the Newlywed Game. It has nothing to do with me, your delightful host, Brett Ballantini. It has to do with the Atlanta, or whatever the heck it's called, in Cobb County Stadium. I got the sense from Melissa she was a little disappointed in that ballpark, but both of your overall assessments of the latest park you have visited just this past weekend.
Yeah, to me, so it's Truist Field.
Truist.
And so we're driving into on Thursday when we came into the city, and we're driving in and I see this huge stadium and I'm like, oh, that must be it. And Shaun's like, no, I don't think that's it. And then we see it says Georgia State University. Wow. And I was like, wow. I was like, that is a really big stadium for a college team that I've never heard of. Yeah. And then later we found out from a couple that we met on our food tour that we went on, they're like, the city just kind of gave it to Georgia State when they decided they were going to build this new stadium. And so I was like, wow, that must be nice. It was not for a stadium that was built in 2017. For me, it was absolutely nothing spectacular. Mm-hmm. Like, being that new, I would have expected them to take all the cool parts of all the newer ballparks and make some really neat thing. But the sight lines weren't good. Like, they didn't have really any unique types of food that really stood out. And they didn't have like big stores or anything. Like, there's huge lines for all the little stores that they had. So it gets a thumbs down, probably the low 5 out of the 21 I've been to. It's like in the bottom 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they missed an opportunity. They could have taken all of that extra foam that the people bring into the ballpark and wave during the ballpark. They could have used that as a nice below ground filter. It would have helped drain water for those very rainy attack. Atlanta, they could have taken all of those tomahawks and laid them in the bed of the field. A really missed opportunity there, Atlanta. You didn't listen to any of the other human beings outside of your ballpark in terms of building that thing in Cobb County while you still had at least one or two other ballparks. I'm so old, guys. I saw 2 parks away. Yeah, give me your assessment, please, now, Shaun.
Well, it's almost like they didn't have enough space and they kind of shoved it in. So the park doesn't hold as many people as I would say a normal stadium. It's one of the smaller ballparks. And so since they didn't have enough space and they had to put it in, then you got the big screen in the outfield, the video board, and then that's kind of pushed in a little bit also. And so you can't really see the video board from a lot more areas than I would say at a regular ballpark. So that's some of the negatives by putting it in the area. And I guess they just really wanted this big push for the new ballpark to have it in a better part of town, easier access. At the same time, you're losing some space and some people.
Yeah. I saw Fulton County Stadium. That's how old I am. And I saw that as like after graduating college. And that's how ridiculous the situation is where you have 3 ballparks in the space of, some of our lifetimes, for crying out loud. I find it ironic. And, again, this is going to be underhanded dig at the Cubs. Sorry, Shaun, you're on a White Sox podcast. Fine. But, it's funny when Comiskey 2 was built, one of the criticisms was, boy, it's like a shopping mall. And it's just funny now that, Wrigley Field and Wrigleyville, probably for good reason, given the fact that you don't just want it to be a vomit trough. I mean, it has certainly gotten family friendlier. I mean, there is a really mallification of that ballpark. Again, I haven't been to see it all up close and personal, but it seems pretty clear that it's more user friendly. There's a little bit more convenience. There's maybe a little more fan friendliness, which you could argue is a really good move. It's just ironic that was a criticism of Sox Park. And now, talking about a park that's maybe not even big enough. I mean, here's the thing, Shaun, you have to fit the ballpark into the mall. So, I mean, if the mall just didn't allow for much room for enough seats, hey, sorry, you're just not going to get all the seats you want, because as far as I understand, it is quite a complex there with like nightclubs and restaurants and stuff too, and shuttle buses. So maybe the ballpark wasn't the top priority for Atlanta. They're getting so used to building them because they'll just figure, another 10, 20 years. They'll just
in 20 years, they'll do it all over again, find another spot and give this one to another university and move on.
I like some of the atmosphere there, though, but Melissa didn't enjoy it. But, maybe it's because they were losing, so they were doing more of those things, I guess. Because they were winning, I guess.
Yeah, spirited they are. They sure are spirited. Okay, welcome back to the Newlywed Game. We are here for round 2. And boy, the questions get harder. Well, no, they don't. I just randomly wrote them down. But okay, Melissa will start this time. Wait, did Melissa start the first time? No, Melissa will start this time. The challenge is on. I need to know who Shaun's favorite all-time Cubs player is.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that. I don't know if I'm right, but I have to. It has to be Ryan Sandberg. It has to be.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, nice. Comes through. All right, you got to keep.
That was little. It was Bill Buckner, but
yeah, Bill Buckner? How can you Ryan Sandberg?
But then it changed to Ryan Sandberg.
Yeah, that is perfectly logical. Okay, pressure is on, Shaun, because now you need to tell me who the all-time favorite. And I think this would be. I think I know this one by heart, so I'm hoping you do. Favorite all-time White Sox player of your wife's.
Would it have to be Carlton Fisk?
Oh, he comes through. He comes through in the clutch.
Tagline.
Yeah, although after he got drunk in a cornfield, it kind of went down a little bit, but still, he still is. Like, I'm still attached to that childhood part of me.
If you liked him barking at Deion Sanders, then you're just going to have to accept him driving drunk into a cornfield. It's sort of somehow related. It's just a grumpy guy, right? So. All right, Carlton, we sort of love you, even though you went in as a Red Sox player. Okay, the killer round. Yeah, so far, I'm predicting perhaps perfect scores, although this one, I believe, is the most esoteric. So this might be a challenge. And I am going to give perhaps the advantage to, I don't know who going first would give the advantage. So I'm going to stick with Melissa going first. I need you to tell me whether or not, if your husband could not, how do I phrase this? This might not come out right. So this man in a tie, but if given the choice between having to root for the other team, meaning your husband has to root for the White Sox, or he can't be a baseball fan, he can't follow baseball, will he choose to still be a baseball fan or to convert to a White Sox fan?
Oh, I think he would convert to a White Sox fan.
So it's baseball versus the Crosstown team.
That's a tough question. I guess I would convert.
We'll round it up.
Only if the White Sox will change their general manager and their management, then I'd feel a lot better.
We all feel that
yes,
way.
We're behind you there, Shaun. So yes, you have our vote. Okay, so I need to know. This might be a trickier question. It might be more of a 50-50 for Melissa. But Shaun, would Melissa cross over to be a Cubs fan, or would she just find another sport or otherwise not follow baseball?
She'd probably not follow baseball.
That's correct.
Wow, very good. Wow.
Correct. That's correct.
Congratulations.
I gave him the little empathy to win the World Series, but
that's over now.
The tentacles of childhood are just too.
Sure.
They're too deep.
Did you explain to Brett about our basement yet, or no?
Oh, how like it's all White Sox and then Shaun has a Cubs corner. It's literally like a corner.
Yeah, she has the whole wall, and then I just got this little spot.
And that wall, and then I've got my stuff up here, and then Shaun has the corner.
Now this is a question as we celebrate the dual victory, and of course we'll be even though you live in the same home, we will both be sending you home with copies of the home game. But I need to know. I was going to ask this earlier. I mean, I think I pretty much well know where Sage's allegiances lie. How has the family dynamic been in terms of the children rooting? Are both big baseball fans, or was there ever any power struggle to see which team would win their hearts?
Well, yeah. So Sage, I will give. He's such a good kid, Brett. Like he's the sweetest kid ever. So he does watch he will tune in to see what the Cubs are doing. He says it's his second team, but I said, okay, like, come on, let's be real. He's like, yeah, you don't. So
he's. I think he does follow the Sox more now, and I would say though he is generally interested in the Cubs. So he'll watch them on his own even sometimes. But growing up, you have to realize, Brett, that when he was a baby, it was all White Sox stuff, White Sox sheets, everything in his bedroom, White Sox outfits, White Sox hat.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And they
didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
No choice.
And our daughter, she would say she's a White Sox fan. She doesn't really care, but neither one of them have ever been to Wrigley Field.
Oh.
And they've both grown up going to White Sox games, and they've never been. Now, Sage does want to go this year. Shaun's mom is also a Cubs fan. So the three of them are going to try to hit up a game this year. But he just has finally just gotten into sports. Took forever, but he finally in the last couple of years, and now he's all in the Blackhawks, and
our kids would just go to the games and eat the food, and
be
able to tell you what was going on.
Sure. Well, I will admit that before being on the beat where work required me to be at Wrigley Field, I will say that before taking that job where I had to travel to Wrigley Field to cover the White Sox at Wrigley Field, I had been to as many baseball games at Wrigley Field as I had been to soccer games at Wrigley Field and hockey games at Wrigley Field. So I can empathize with the fact that both of your children have yet to traverse and to, visit the urinal troughs or, what the ivy. I mean, listen, I've said this.
The rite of passage, the urinal.
Yeah. You haven't seen the world if you haven't peed in the trough at Wrigley Field.
And I have said, and people on our site disagree and push back on me, among the classic parks, I'll throw Yankee Stadium in there as well, fair to count, Comiskey Park, original Comiskey Park, Fenway, Wrigley. I certainly do prefer Wrigley to Fenway Park. I preferred it to Yankee Stadium. I don't prefer it to Comiskey Park, but it is a solid park. I mean, it's very intimate. I mean, I'm not speaking, again, complete exception here, Shaun. I'm not speaking about the fans in the park, but certainly the park itself, in addition to the fact that it's a, national treasure or whatever you want to call it, even though now it's got video boards and all that stuff that, was never supposed to have. Just sightlines wise, feeling like, maybe you're not going to get in the middle of a brawl like at, you might at Fenway. I certainly always championed it, among those older parks, which I think is a fair comparison, at least directly now, to Fenway. And I certainly prefer it to Fenway. So, I can poke fun at it and be proud that I've only seen like one game as a fan there, but it just worked out that way. Soccer, hey, I'm not a soccer fan, but your school's going to go to a soccer game.
Concerts.
Oh yeah, I've been to a concert.
Yeah, you were at a concert there.
Oh, see, so you broke your own rules by walking into Wrigley. How many games have you seen at? I mean, obviously you're going, I suppose, at least sometimes with your husband, but have you been to a pretty fair amount at Wrigley?
At the last Cubs game I've been to was when we went in 2016 to that playoff game. But we used to go to a lot of the Crosstown games pre-World Series for both teams when we were younger too and could deal with it. And then we vowed to never go again. And now we're taking Sage next week. So that will be fun. We're sitting with the CHGO guys up in the 500 level. Sage has never sat in the 500 level.
Ooh,
He's so spoiled that he's never had to climb into the rafters. So it next week will be really interesting.
Well, you've been to 3 Cubs games at Wrigley Field.
That's how many Crosstown games we've been to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, 2 Crosstown, and then we went to the divisional game.
Okay. And then I went to one when I was in college before I met you. Okay. So, yeah.
Well, you can make Sage extra envious when you tell him that the front row of the current upper deck at Sox Park, even after renovations, is farther away than the last row of the upper deck at Comiskey Park. So I'm sorry, he was, in this sense, born too late. He did not get to enjoy the majesty that was Comiskey Park, the best ballpark ever built, the baseball palace of the world. But hey, nothing he can do about that now. So hey, enjoy the 500 section, and he can have the experience of, oh my gosh, it's so steep. By the way, old Yankee Stadium, original Yankee Stadium, was even steeper. Plus, it was also like 800 years old and rickety. I'm guessing they weren't keeping totally up to standards there either. That was a more frightening experience to me, with columns still getting in your way than New Comiskey ever was. But not like I relish going back up. Aside from maybe fireworks or the flying Elvi, I don't see any reason necessarily, or I guess the Chicago guys, hey, shout out Chicago, to go up to the 500 level. But hey, it'll be fun. And the good news is you're far away from the action. So based on what you're probably going to see, maybe safe.
I don't know.
Oh, eyes getting burned.
Those games get so rowdy. Like people are so. That's why we stopped going. We were like, these people are nuts. Yeah. But then, Sage was like, all right, he wants to go to one. We'll go.
If you recall, it was novel to have a night game. They basically never did night games for hours the first 20 years, because it's like, we know people will murder each other. Maybe not literally, but yes, there's going to be brawls. People are going to film it. It's going to look ugly for whatever the home, whoever the home park is, and the fans. So it's like novel that there are ever even night games now, and they still do them rarely on the weekends. I mean, I think this year are both not weekend games. So
and they only do 2. Is that part of it too? Like they play 3 against the Mets, they play 3 against the Braves. They only play 2 against the Cubs.
Yeah, but they still give us that extra one because of that classic rivalry that a lot of fans just say we don't care about anymore. And I'll admit, it's probably some of the shyness off.
Oh, so we get 2 in each stadium. Okay,
yeah, so it's still one extra.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I know you want more opportunities to be way up in the 500 section watching the Cubs and Sox play baseball on the field. So, all right, well, that's something to look forward to. I'll look forward to getting the report from that game. Hey, both of you, Shaun, Melissa, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for doing this. Now, Jackie and Wes Crestel know what is in store for them if they indeed decide to toe the line and take on as our second pair of couples, see if they can match your perfect scores on now they can practice. Now they know the question.
Yeah, now they know the question.
You're going to have question.
You're gonna have to
All
get
right.
new questions because that's not fair.
Music. They're rock and
I'm
rollers.
competitive. That's not
music.
fair.
Yeah, no, that isn't fair. I'll come up with different questions. Or hey, guys, don't stop watching. Rewind. Don't watch. All right. Well, thanks for doing this. This is novel. We've never done this before, so I appreciate again, Shaun. Courageous. You came with an open heart and a friendly spirit to speak with two White Sox fans, and hopefully we treated you gently. And thanks. We learned some stuff. And so I don't know, a month from now, I don't know, it'll be podcast, 185 or whatever it's going to be. We'll do another one of these pre-Crosstown whatevers if the Crustals decide to step up to the plate, or else who knows, we'll drag Dante Jones and his very strange. I got to know what happened to his father because that skipped a generation, and there's definitely got an explanation. Don't want to put him under the really, really hot lamp, but I'm going to have to figure out what is going on with Papa Jones there. But yeah, we will probably maybe we'll do these forever. There's a lot of mixed families out there. So thank you for offering yourselves up as our debut Crosstown mixed couple family. It's been a lot of fun and appreciate it. I guess we'll do it again sometime. Who knows? Maybe, Shaun, you are invited when we do our Field of Dreams podcast. That's coming up pretty soon. I know, you found your way into the cornfields. They're not in the way Carlton Fisk did. So, maybe you can join us for that too. Otherwise, hope to see you around at some point at the ballpark or at a podcast. And Melissa, we'll be talking in 5 minutes or whatever. Okay. Hey, thanks everybody for listening, watching, whatever it is you're doing. We'll have more of these. Enjoy the Crosstown pairing. Hopefully the White Sox will embarrass the Cubs for 2. Sorry, Shaun. And, we can feel good about ourselves for 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah. And, okay. And maybe next time around it'll be the Crustals or the Joneses, or who knows, maybe we'll just punt because we lost by 20 collective runs to the Cubs and we're just going to pretend the second series won't be played. Anyhow, we'll do something for you. And I guarantee you we're going to have a podcast sooner than you are ready for it. So until then, thank you for watching.